everyone, I'm Gemma Star and welcome to another episode of Man Speak. Man Speak is an offshoot to our Heart Warrior series where some of our Heart Warriors come back and talk for a whole show on a subject that they're particularly passionate about, that's close to their heart, that they can teach and they have embodied. And today we have the return of our number 49 Heart Warrior, and his name is Nicholas Blewett. And Nicholas has a great theme subject for today. And as you can see, I'm in the theme because his subject for today is the inner animal, cultivating the beast within, particularly talking about men and masculinity. So I'm really excited to hear what Nicholas has to say. Nicholas is a fellow Aussie from the Gold Coast. He's an acupuncturist. He's a 4th degree martial arts instructor, and he's also a qigong trainer. So really excited and honoured to have Nicholas back and to hear all about the inner animal. Enjoy. Hello, Nicholas Blewett. Welcome back, and this time on Man Speak. How are you doing?
Hello, Gemma. I'm really well. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. I'm excited for this topic. Bringing out the animal in man, cultivating the beast, the inner animal. So let's have an overview. What's this discussion going to be about?
Okay, so the inner animal for me was really a process I've gone through in my own life where, I guess it's given different names, that the shadow is probably one of the biggest ones perhaps, but that part of ourselves that sits in the background, that rears its head every now and again and trips us up. And that now, I guess, with a lot of the modern context we're getting around it, and how do we actually integrate that? And so the inner animal for me is kind of about my journey of understanding that there's that part of me that I feel could rip down entire cities, could rip the world apart at times. And I think there's men out there that really identify with just having that level of energy or passion or animal within themselves. That what do men do with that? How do we reconcile it and actually utilize it? Because there's so much talk these days about the lover energy. And I'm probably going to say some things today around that lover energy to really kind of flip it on its head a little bit. Because I actually believe the lover energy can very unintentionally, perhaps, but still irrespective, become extremely toxic at times. And I think there's probably men out there like me who feel this, who understand it, who don't hop into growth or personal development or spiritual development simply because of that really lover energy of everything's meant to be nice and everything's meant to be gooey and soft and squishy and beautiful. And I don't necessarily believe that is the case or has to be the case, or if it is, that the avenue to get there is not the same as it is for everyone. And so the inner animal really has come out of my journey of learning through making mistakes, through destroying my life, through hurting people, through hurting myself, of how I learned through internal martial arts, qigong, meditation, self-reflection, and personal development work, how to cultivate the animal. And I think we probably often see words in our society like tame the animal, or, and I think that could be part of the problem. And there's other men talking about this in, quite high-ranking men talking about this, Jordan Peterson, for one, who talks a lot about this aspect of ourselves as men that we need to actually cultivate. And, there's a book, Mr. No More Mr. Nice Guy, and they talk about how it's really that nice guy syndrome and that passive-aggressive level, and that trying to suppress or please people by being nice and taming that animal and not knowing how to actually use it and express it, that actually gets us into a lot more trouble than potentially just really integrating that within ourselves. And so the inner animal is a somatic process, a somatic training process that I think really integrates that the archetypes, but that warrior and magician energy with that king and the lover to really help us actually, as the men who have got more of a warrior style mindset, to not have to become all-encompassing love, because that's not every man. So that's kind of what the inner animal program's around. It's about taking from the yang aspects of qigong, so to speak. And so when most people think of qigong or internal, they think of probably spirituality and energy and aspects of this. And that's all very accurate and true. But with my experience with qigong and internal martial arts, it actually can teach us how to integrate, harness, cultivate, and use that animal inside us for the aspects of our lives that we want to develop. And so that's what the inner animal process is about, is really kind of finding that yin-yang balance within qigong and teaching men how to cultivate that yang aspect, but in a very integrated format.
Oh, this is fascinating. Do you think that men have been intentionally targeted over however many decades to subdue this animal within because it is potentially dangerous to the higher powers?
I don't like to take my mind to those places.
Okay.
So whether that is the case or not, it's happened that men have found themselves there. So I don't like to really get wrapped up in that blame of, this is, however, irrespective, we are in a situation where this needs to be harnessed. And power is always shifting. And if good men can, I govern my life by almost one line. All it takes for evil to win is for good men or good people to do nothing. And so I never like to get trapped in that conspiracy level of that's happened. I prefer to turn that around and go, irrespective of the cause, if I live at effect, what do I need to do to change that, to actually just create that difference in the world? As Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. And so I think naturally, as men stand up and really integrate, and I guess we did see through COVID and different elements where that big divide happened, where there was, the vax mask wearing, go home and sit at home, and the guys who were doing it. And there was a big pull, on social media, women saying, where are the real men? Why are they wearing masks? But I actually saw it on a different level, that the men sitting at home with their masks being vaxxed are trying to protect people just as much as the people who are not doing it believe that they are. And it just fell into that personal thing. So, but I do think there is that element where that masculine energy, that yang energy does need to stand up and start leading away from the more tyrannical, the more unhealthy aspects of masculinity. And that needs strong, balanced men who can actually control that animal so that they don't fall subject or prey or under the guise of less healthy mindsets.
Yeah, no, totally get that. Okay. How would a man recognize in himself if he had his animal tamed as to, was actually had integrated it?
I think if they'd found that integrated, they would have a very balanced personality. They would be humble, but they would still have the righteousness to stand up and be heard. They would have the assertiveness to speak their mind, yet they wouldn't be overbearing. They would be benevolent and kind and share themselves and their wealth and their emotions with people for the betterment, but would also have healthy boundaries to stop people using and abusing that from them. They would probably find that they are able to separate themselves from the herd and do what's right, irrespective of group mindset. So they'd probably find themselves at sometimes really on the outskirts of popular culture when they were choosing to do things that were deep within inside themselves right. And that's the interesting thing about this is what's right can be different for different people. And so for sometimes for some men, that might actually be following a mindset of the popular culture at the time, or it might be completely stepping away from that. So I think it really comes down to each individual just knowing and having that deep self-worth and confidence in themselves that whatever they choose, they are choosing not only like, I don't think I think we've fallen into a trap with this as well. And it's interesting to kind of skirt this information where as men, we've almost been indoctrinated that our entire lives exist for everyone else. And we see men out there every day working themselves to the bone at work, then coming home and having to do everything for their, do heaps more. And it's not to say that women don't. I mean, that's within its own thing, and that definitely happens. But like, I definitely watched my father work from dawn till almost midnight, whether it was for as a principal teaching at schools or at home for us, and in his own way, very stoic, just going about his business without ever whinging, just to make sure that everything was done. And I think that's a real expectation. And whilst that is a masculine quality, I think sometimes as men, we fall into that thing of what do we actually deserve for ourselves, first and foremost. And so within that, I think as long as a man has that self-confidence and self-worth to make the decisions for himself, first and foremost, then everything else will kind of fall into place. But if he's going outside and saying, well, I don't really want to do this, but I have to do this for X, Y, Z, to please these people or to make these people happy, that could potentially lead him into a lot of difficulties and a lot of, not having any self-worth, not having any confidence, not enjoying life, not having any fulfillment. And that will lead to him acting out as he struggles to reconcile, does he have any worth for himself in this world? So
is the solution, because obviously, for the man to create the balance of, if he does have a family, obviously, doing some type of something to generate income so he can provide ultimately for the family, is the balance to find something that he enjoys doing and then he enjoys giving to the family. Like, how does he, we're saying that so many men are caught in this trap of work and, paying the bills or providing, and they're not left fulfilled. How do they overcome that?
I think it can be really tricky in this day and age. And I think we're definitely moving to more of a situation where men are able to create their own lives again. So I watched a documentary many years ago, and when the Industrial Revolution occurred and people started to get jobs, that men back then saw jobs as paid slavery. They actually saw it as a second aspect of slavery. Because before that, a man had the free right and the free domain to create his existence, and he would do that with all the gifts that he was given. And some men would rise to the top and other men would probably end up being left behind and maybe not getting much. But that's a reality of masculinity, whatever day and age we live in. But I think we're moving into a time now where we can start to do that again. And we're seeing more of that happen for everyone, women as well. I think just society is large. So I think men have more of an opportunity to do that now, but it is very easy and sometimes necessary to just get a job and pay the way and pay for your family's existence, because that in itself is a very stoic thing for a man to do. And if you can reconcile that within yourself, you could still be completely fulfilled. But you need to find within that the aspects that you do. But if you are unfulfilled, if you're going to work and you think you're worth more, then it is really your God-given right to do something with that. And we see all the time, I guess, in entrepreneurial circles where people and men have stepped outside that and said to their family, like, I'm unfulfilled. I need to start this thing that I've always wanted to do because it means so much to me. And because it does, they're fulfilling their purpose and they are happier and they do make it work and they do earn an income and they go on to leading their families to greater wealth and success and personal fulfillment and all these other aspects as well. So I think, again, it just comes down to exactly where you're at, because if my business suddenly failed, I'd go back and I'd just have to get a job and I would do that. And that would be okay. I would then, of course, keep trying to build, but I would, and I may not enjoy that job, but that would also just be a rude awakening, and that's reality. And I think that's part of that red pill thing, that unhappiness of being in that job should point to the fact that something else needs to change in your life, and you need to take action to actually find that fulfillment in what it means. Because if you're unfulfilled, you're going to come home and you're not going to be able to lead your family. You're not going to have the self-worth, the confidence to have a happy family. You're going to come home, you're going to want to tune out by playing video games or, getting stoned or drinking, or, you're just going to be grumpy. You could fall into domestic violence because you're so unhappy with yourself. Like, so many other aspects of that could happen. So if that is happening, you are feeling unfulfilled, I think it is our duty to find our purpose and stretch and reach to make that a reality.
Yeah, that's a great catalyst there, isn't it, for all men to be able to look at and ask themselves, are they being fulfilled with, their job or their purpose? Someone said job the other day was jump out of bed. I like that.
Yeah.
What animal are you inside? Do you feel you're a particular animal, or does that animal change?
The human animal.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of what I talk about as well, is, we want to put animal archetypes on us, but what is actually the human animal? And I think that's what we've lost touch. And so within myself and my own belief system, and I know other people have differences of opinion, I really like to come back to reality. And so I don't go into a lot of esoteric things of that nature. And so I think that what we're really looking for is that human animal. Who was the animal that crossed frozen tundra, pulling sleds across sleigh in freezing conditions with their family so they could find food to eat? Who was that animal? Who was the animal who could have extrasensory perception while hunting without needing to speak to the other men who were hunting to understand how they could hunt down lions, tigers, bears? Who were these animals? And there's an ancient Taoist text. It's like 3,000 years old. And in the first chapter, the emperor of China is talking to his Taoist medical advisor, and he asks him a question about men, basically. And his Taoist advisor gives 4 different types of men, like going from the immortals to sages, down to acquired beings, down to, I can't remember the 4th one's name, right? But I think they were naturalists. There you go. They were naturalists. But he basically talks about the higher levels having sight, sound, hearing, and extrasensory perceptions that went far beyond ordinary people. And so who were these animals that we used to be, these ancients? And so this is a part of the qigong aspect, is that the way that qigong is teaching us to move, the way it's teaching us to inhabit and somatically embody and reinfuse mind, body, and spirit back together. The reason I've called it the inner animal is because it actually helps us get in contact with the human animal. And so instead of going, I'm a lion or I'm a tiger or I'm a dragon, which, I'd like to go there. Who is the human animal? Who is that being that our ancestors were? And how do we reintegrate that? Because it's my belief that my experience, my physical experience with Tai Chi and Qigong, that it helps me to become nature. So a nice analogy of this is, if you're sitting in a car driving and you've got a windscreen, it's like you're watching reality on a TV as you drive. You seem very disconnected from everything. But if you're on a motorbike, all of a sudden, you are on the highway. You are a very soft, squishy thing driving along with these really hard metallic objects that are going to crush you at any moment. So you are now in the picture, not watching it through the windshield. And so I think we tend to watch life through the windshield. And with all our modern cons, we definitely do. So through my experience with Tai Chi and Qigong, the way it reintegrates our body, we literally re-become that animal. The contrivances of the human being drop away. And we become the grass, we become the tree, we become the animals we see, the mountains we see, the rivers we see, because we are now a part of nature again, not separate from it. And so I was talking to a group of Australian Indigenous people about this, and they said, that's why we go walkabout. And so, even the ancient, the shaman, the Amazonian shaman and different shaman, they leave the tribe for a long period of time and just go out into nature. And part of that is to drop away that human aspect of ourselves that starts to please, that starts to fall under the social norms that we're living in, so that they can actually live outside that human part of us again. And that's why when they come back, they drop these truth bombs on us, because they're like, well, that's not nature. That's not who you are at the core. That's not reality. That's not who you are as a fully functioning being. That's not your nature. And that's what the Buddhists would say. And so just to delve into this for a moment longer, the way of moving in Qigong is very different from the way we normally move. Not a lot of Qigong people move this way. Qigong has become broken down where just the arms move, and nothing else is really happening. But a student of mine gave me a book a little while ago with a highlighted chapter from a woman who was talking about how babies move in utero. And so when the baby is still inside its mother, it actually moves from its lower area, lower dantian in Chinese medicine. And so if the baby wanted to move its arm, it would have to ripple its arm out, like shrug to move its arm, which means this entire muscle chain needs to be activated. But it doesn't just activate up. That means the same ripple moves down the legs. It moves, everything tends to happen. And so when a cheetah is running, you see the whole cheetah scrunch. Oh, everything is moving. Its tail's moving, its neck's moving. Everything is creating that run. It's not the legs, but everything in the cheetah's run is adding to its movement. And so that's actually the way we're meant to move in our Qigong, is from what this lady was calling radial movement, radial whole body movement. Now, even before I read her book, I used to call this type of movement whole body internal movement. And it means that we're actually rejoining our entire muscle chain from the tips of our fingers to the tips of our toes, to the top of our head, to front to back, into one single movement or one single intent. And so instead of having two arms and two legs, we have one body. And when we get into that phase, which the Chinese used to call sung, a state they call sung, everything drops away, and you become nature again. You are now that one single entity. And so the inner animal is really about finding the human animal. And the reason I think that a lot of men will recognize with this is a lot of men, when we want to start talking about, I'm going to become a lion, I'm going to do animal play, and I'm going to pretend to be a lion. And guys are like, what the fuck? Like, we don't necessarily get it. Like, guys, if you agree with me, put a comment wherever this is, right? I know you're going to agree. But if we want to become that human animal, who is that ancient hunter that lives within inside us? Who is that ancient shaman that lives inside us that was in command of his mind and body? Who is the ancient, tribal leader? Who is that father who had to stand up in front of wild animals to protect his family? Who is that animal within us? And so that's what I've kind of discovered through the internal martial arts, is it has this process of reintegrating us. And in that ancient Taoist text, they talk about how the ancients used qigong to teach them to become natural. And so if this book is 3,000, 2,500, 3,000 years old, who are the ancients? How old are they? And what were they doing? So much like the Indigenous Australians doing corroboree dances, and yet they still pretended to be animals, right? Because they were learning to, how does a kangaroo feel and think? So they would embody these aspects. However, it was part of the human's ability to use our imagination to move into different states to experience things, but that's part of the human animal. And so how do we find that? How do we get in deep touch with that and really reintegrate that ancient animal aspect of ourselves with now? Because there is definitely an element of, if we want to heal the planet, we need to heal ourselves. And if we need to heal ourselves, we need to heal the planet. It's a symbiotic relationship when we're not separate. And so we need, I think, that the saving grace for the planet will be actually coming back to be that animal. Because when I've experienced those states of deep sung, where I am nature, I no longer have desire or craving for the excesses, the distractions, the contrivances. I'm quite happy to go back to almost living in that timeless thing that the Australian Indigenous do, where time, it's not even a thing. Like, I'm just doing what I'm doing. Okay. I don't need fancy toys. I don't, everything is actually just there, and you can see it, you can feel it. And a deep level of contentment and resolve and empowerment kind of bubbles up from that feeling. And I sometimes have to slap myself after training when I come back. So I'm like, right, now I've got to jump back on the internet and earn money, and I've got to exist in this human world. And it's kind of like get back to it, because that can drop away. So how do we learn to reinfuse that deep level of contentment to just be human?
Yeah, I love this. And it's interesting, the Australian Indigenous didn't even have, well, I know there's a multitude of languages from all the different areas, but from my interaction with them out at Uluru, they didn't even have words for yesterday and tomorrow. There was only ever today and now. So, that's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Before we jump into the how, I'm sure you've got loads of tips and everything for how men can find the inner animal. You touched on the physical aspects, as in, how the cheetah uses its whole body. So I'm also interested in the emotional and the mental aspects of the inner animal.
Okay. So I think in today's society, we overemphasize emotions and intellect. And so from a Chinese energetic perspective, part of the meditation is to bring us back down to this lower Dantian. But for a lot of people, our energy starts to float up, and it sits in the chest, in the head. Now, the heart is seen as part of the mind, and the brain, of course, if the energy sits up in the head, we turn over. And so we live as a society almost from here up. So there's nothing wrong with emotions or intellect, but we overemphasize them. You know, it's like our society is just having one giant masturbate over how amazing we are, and look at all these things we can create, you know, and we get caught in our ego.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry, are you referring to men, or to the masculine or the feminine, or both?
Oh, I think both in this, you know, humanity as a whole. As a whole. So part of what this idea of qigong and Chinese medicine is how do we take our mind back down into our core and live from there? So that still means we can still be intelligent, we can still have emotions, but they're reintegrated, they're grounded into our physical body. But what they would say in Chinese medicine is that energy floats up, and then we get stuck in those contrivances of trying to grab and all this kind of stuff. So as far as the intellect and the mind goes, in my inner animal programs, there's no talking. We train silently. Okay, maybe grunts, as you know, because there's a lot of arm hitting, and you know, there's a lot of, you know, so there might be some grunts, but the idea is that we don't want to get stuck intellectualizing about the process. And so part of the process in the animal, like we do this thing where the men like smack forearms or smacking the arms or doing different things like that. And it's a silent training exercise. If you need to communicate to your other man to, like, you know, soften it down or go a bit harder, communicate non-verbally. Okay. And one of the things when I ran the last in-animal program was how much men embodied from a silent process. So whereas normal men's circles are sitting around and talking, this is how you should operate from this situation, and that's how you'd operate, you know, should do this. Okay, there is a time and a place for that. But I always found when I was a kid, when someone was lecturing me and telling me how I should have done, what I should have done, I'm like, I know. No, I know, stop telling, right? And you get real. And I think for a lot of men, they actually know how they should act or how they should act differently. Whether they're in touch with that right at the time or not is a different thing. But definitely, you know, hindsight's 2020. So as they look back, oh, I could have done better, I know. But what I found was the reports I was getting back from the men each week is that they could actually access, there was something different, something tangible, a physical substance that they could access that was allowing them to respond to life in a way that they probably felt they should have. So they didn't need to be cognitive about it. And so I think what this comes down to from a men's perspective is, you know, and whether these terms are right or wrong, and, you know, there's lots of talk about this, but, you know, that idea of an alpha male and like a beta male. And so, like, what's the difference? Why can some men access just this masculine trait and feel that confidence in the self-worth and the assertiveness to speak up, but also the ability to, you know, be quiet and follow if it's correct, like that nice balanced state? And the betas who aren't able to maybe access that, who don't speak up and find themselves in bad situations and feel upset because they aren't heard and whatever it might be, what's the difference? And so what I was finding is just through the somatic work that we do and talk and getting them to breathe in the discomfort of some of these drills because it starts to hurt. And instead of being reactive, breathe it in. That's qi. That's yang energy. Breathe it in, ground it down, observe it for what it is, don't react, and just allow it to be what it is. And I was getting texts from guys midweek going, I don't know what we did on Monday night, but I've just had the most awesome week. And I, you know, one guy was like, you know, I go to jiu-jitsu class and there's just a level of confidence about me now that win or lose, I still have that confidence and I'm not being broken by men who are beating me. And I've got that, and I want to get into the stronger men and try. There was a tangibility to that. And other guys like, you know, oh, I'm going to work and I'm speaking up now about things that I never would have spoken up about because I just feel I've got that confidence. Other guys being like, I now feel confident, more confident just talking to other men. I never liked talking to men. There's a lot of men out there who have that trust in the masculine broken, but they were starting to find that they just felt more comfortable. And so this isn't giving them words or extra tools. These skills are there. But some men just aren't able to access them. And so this inner animal process and getting in touch with this and learning to sit in on a somatic level allows men to just naturally begin to manifest the qualities that are innate within their personality.
Okay, this is great. Now, I know you're running a course, and we'll get to that at all the details of that at the end of the show, but not everyone's based on the Gold Coast. So let's talk to the majority of men who aren't going to be able to attend your course.
Yeah.
Okay, where can they start accessing their inner animal?
Getting into nature, away from people. Don't make it a cognitive trip where you go with friends and you carry on and you talk. Go alone. Go sit somewhere in nature just alone. Yeah. Whether that's the beach, whether that's out in the bush, start spending a lot of time, more time alone. Move away from the distractions, move away from the other voices, the other opinions, the other things. Start to really get in touch with that element of yourself that naturally knows what you like and what you want. So get into nature alone. Another thing can be start a martial art. You know, some of the guys who contacted me about this course were like, oh, I don't, and that's kind of part of it. So what I do in this course, I speak into that men are meant to work reciprocally to build each other's level, not bully or beat each other into submission. I'll talk about that later. So a lot of men can have that real fear and angst, but actually getting in and being physical and gathering that mindset of cultivating your skills, getting in touch with your body, getting out of your head, and feeling yourselves physically. So, I mean, that could come from any exercise, but I think that contact with men is really important. And I guess this is also why you don't see many martial artists picking fights on the street. They don't need to. They have that level of self-confidence to kind of not need to express that. They know how much they can hurt someone or be hurt. So it's not a thing. Yeah. Generally, it's men who haven't learned to harness this animal that feel that way. So go and join a martial arts club and start doing something like that, or even just physical exercise. But do it alone and really feel into your body and have a somatic internal experience with what you're doing. If you can access some qigong, which I've got some amazing online programs coming up, that doing some qigong, because it's a physical meditation. Now, me as a young man, go and meditate. Yeah, I tried because that's the way I was. But when I added in a physical experience to the meditation, it gave me something else to work with that was tangible, that allowed me to deepen or access the ability to meditate better, because there was reality to it again. It wasn't just, I'm trying to just do nothing and be a monk, and meditate like that. So doing some qigong can be really good, because again, it's that personal time just with yourself. You generally would get out in nature, at least your backyard, and do it. And it rejoins that entire body because of the way that the qigong is. And of course, as you said, there might not be a way that everyone can access that for themselves. But, jump on YouTube, watch a little bit there, but just find some really good quality stuff, because there is a lot of really super esoteric spiritual stuff. So if you do want to do it in kind of more of a yang, more masculine way, then search out channels or have a yarn with me. Other ways that guys might do it. Put down technology. Put down technology and step away from it. and just have, you know, a day or so where you just put down your phone and you completely don't interact. You don't even have to go out in nature, but just disconnect. I would also definitely say step away from other people's opinions. And we're bombarded all the time and told what to do. So part of honing that and cultivating your own inner animals, getting in touch with what you love and what you want and what your soul is speaking to you, as opposed to having, you know, 350 different opinions by people about what a man is and what a man should do, you know, and also, you know, the other side of things, men are shit, men are horror, you know, getting away from all that noise and, you know, finding out what it is that really deeply switches you on a whole level.
Yeah, this is great. And the words that come to mind are silence, presence, being grounded. I've got two labels, and I just want to see if they're the same as the inner animal or if it's something different. So the first one that I hear a lot of is grounded spirituality. Would you say that is the same energy we're accessing or different?
Sometimes when I see people talking about grounded spirituality, I find it over intellectualized. So for me, it's not grounded.
Okay.
I find a little bit of this grounded spiritualities, the concepts, you know, I'm really grounded. And I've listened to some spiritual, I'm really grounded, but they're just off in the clouds talking about super, you know, spiritual esoteric stuff. I think for me anyway, and this is my personal opinion because, you know, people are different. Grounded spirituality takes away the spirituality.
Okay, thank you. All right. Yeah, go on. Oh,
no, it's all right. It's all right.
Another one that I want to clarify is a lot of talk around at the moment about the dark masculine.
Yeah, and it's a word that I almost wanted to use earlier. I almost said it, but I don't believe it's dark.
I guess that's your interpretation of dark because
it is.
You know, I've spoken.
Dark,
yeah, go on.
So dark for me would be bad.
Okay.
So I guess you could say that animal is the dark, but it's not dark. It's I mean, putting that light and dark, it makes it something other. It's not other. It's actually who we are.
Yeah. Well, see, the men that are, one man that I interviewed last week or a few days ago, he said that's why I say it's the interpretation of dark, because he said it's not bad.
Yeah, no.
It's an aspect of light that, like you say, is primal, is animalistic, and they're actually words I think that he used. So it could just be, you know, an
interpretational thing. But I think, again, using that light and dark, maybe that, like, you know, it's yin and yang, it's duality. So I think the main point I was trying to make is by saying dark masculine, it can make it sound bad or wrong. And so you'd have to really talk about it, which that man did the other day. So I'd agree. I actually don't like to think of it like that. I just think it's a part of humans.
Yeah. And it is easy for misinterpretation, and that's the limitations of language, as you said. That's why it's easier just to not talk and to tune in. And
I think the other side of this that I just will speak into for a moment is when we start to get into the dark masculine or shadow work and stuff like this, for me personally, it's a trap for people to get stuck into negative connotations or negative emotions and believing that if they get to the bottom of this one day, they're going to be this light being, you know, this super spiritual thing. So whilst at times life happens and shit happens and we do have to reconcile aspects of our being so we can continue, I think when people get stuck into shadow work, it can be really limiting, because as a human being, neurologically, we can only ever grow forward. we can only ever, that's time, isn't it? We can only ever go forward. So if we're going forward, churning up the past, we're actually neurologically rewriting that into ourselves all the time. I believe the difference is, whilst we have done things in our past that we could say are parts of our dark masculine or shadow aspect that we need to integrate along the way, instead of getting overly involved in them and really going back into those emotions, we need to just reconcile and make a change and move towards something positive. We always need to be rewriting that the new way we want to be, acting that new way. But if I find that sometimes in that shadow thing, and I've seen people get stuck in it where they just end up for weeks and months going down a rabbit hole of negative emotions because they need to reconcile this shadow, that it's kind of just reinforcing that behavior and reinforcing their personality around those negative connotations, as opposed to just going, no, I'm going to act different today. No, I'm going to act different today. I'm going to act different today, and creating a positive intent that pulls us forward into a new state than being caught up in that bad. So I think sometimes, we've got to be really mindful of that, which is also why I think there's an element of that monk mode of moving away from other people's thoughts and belief systems to create ourselves anew.
Yeah, so important, isn't it? Because as you said, whether it's even on the computer or television or, even in a group of friends, we're hit with, well, men, let's say, and women, but of course we're talking about men, hit with so many opinions and, analysis and everything. But when you just have your own space and time, it's just beautiful to soak in your own energies and not have to be in that total analytical labeling presence, just to sit in me, or into the masculine. Now, is that inner animal just a masculine thing, or is it also a feminine thing?
No, it's a human thing. It's a human thing. We all have that animal. I'm sure we've all seen that female animal come out at times. So yeah, there's if you wanted to use that same language, there's definitely the dark feminine that is part of the woman that needs to cultivate and harness that. When we walked across frozen tundra, our women were right beside us, and an integral aspect of us moving forward. So yeah, definitely women have just as much animal going on as the men do. However, I think that because men have that yang nature, there's not many women that probably feel like they want to rip down cities, but I know for myself that I haven't met many women who really get in touch with that, just generally because they're more nurturing. They have more of that yin quality. So I do think that it's probably more important for men to integrate it because of that very yang, that very explosive element, if mismanaged, can come out in pretty unhealthy ways at time. And I guess there's a whole conversation around there that there are some pretty unhealthy qualities of women as well, that if that animal was integrated better, they would probably behave somewhat different. But the one thing that I think speaks into this a little bit is stuff I've read through masculinity channels, whereby the process of becoming a man is very different than the process of becoming a woman. Becoming a woman tends to be much more of a linear process, whereas men become men through being tested and broken and tested and broken and tested and broken to have to earn that, to earn those qualities of being a man. Because as little boys, we generally start off being more of in that yin nature, or that, more akin to our mother and needing that mother's love. And there's a time we need to step away from that to re-identify ourselves as a man. Whereas for young girls, they still identify with the woman, but they end up, just going in a very linear nature to becoming a woman. Whereas men have to step away from that. And that initiation process isn't really well done in our society, you know, initiation for men these days. And so, yeah, I think there's that real need for a process of men learning to cultivate that animal so they can use it to really hone in on their destiny, on their purpose.
I love this. And this is what, so are you saying that men evolve through challenge, through overcoming challenges? And often, you know, especially as mothers, we see our sons going through challenges. We want to try and make it easier for them. And we might not be doing them any favors. Can you speak into this as maybe to mothers and also to partners? You know, to what degree do we help our man overcome a challenge? And to what degree do we just leave him to get on with it?
So I was recently at a business seminar, and there was a group of women talking about it, and I was kind of talking about masculinity stuff, and one of them was like, you know, oh, my man doesn't, you know, he's not doing very much, you know, rah 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 rah, and she was talking, you know, the usual spiel women do. And I said, so what are you doing to help him? And she's like, well, you know, I tell him all the time to, you know, and I'm like, right, stop telling him what to do. I said, he probably knows. I said, stop mothering him. I said, nurture him, show him how, you know, sexy it is for you when he behaves that way, by nurturing him into it. Don't try and control him and don't overbear him, but when he takes those steps, like, reward him by being really feminine. Like, so at night, I think the best way to explain this is the physical human being from a Chinese medical perspective. The inside of our body, the internal organs are yin. They're like batteries. And they produce, and the yang energy comes out in the morning to the outside of our body. So we go and do things in the morning. We get physical. And then at night, when that yang energy is tired and expended, it goes back inside into the internal organs to be nurtured. So the next day, that yang energy can come out and do everything it's got to do. Whereas at the moment, women are whinging about us. They're berating us. They're telling us how to be, what to do. And generally, it's all about what they need and what we should be doing for them. So there is an element where our yang needs to be nurtured. Like, I often say as a bit of a joke in my workshops that yang energy is like the masculine ego, and it's gone. Yang energy is very easily dispersed. So yin energy is actually dense, hard, cold, inert. Yang energy is immaterial. It's hot, it flows, it moves. Okay? And so yang energy can be very easily dispersed. So it's kind of like the difference between the heat of a fire and a rock. The heat of a fire you could fan away really easily, but a rock, you fan it, it's just a rock, right? It stays being a rock. And so the male ego can be very easily disrupted or dispersed. And so the yin needs to actually nurture the ego and not berate it, not diffuse it, but actually give it a nurturing support. You've got this, babe. Fuck, I love when you do that stuff. Bite your lip. That does something for me. And then the man's like, I got this, right? But if it's like, you haven't taken the rubbish out yet, like I told you 4 minutes ago, like, you're not a real fucking man. Dude should just walk out of the house, keep walking. Like, honestly, done. You know, and I think there's so many broken men who fall under that, who are just constantly taking that, and they wonder why they can't get up, why they can't move forward. Because there is an element where, another story to give this as an analogy. I was at the shops and a young boy hopped up on a seat and was about to jump off, and his grandma was there. And she was like, oh, get down off there, sit down and, you know, be a good little boy. And I couldn't help myself because I just kind of never help myself. And I'm like, excuse me? She's like, yeah. I'm like, do you realize he was just trying to show you his ability and how strong he was? He was trying to impress you. He wouldn't jump off that seat if he knew he couldn't handle it. And if he didn't and he fell down and cried, give him a hug, give him a kiss, tell him how amazingly brave he was and how well he'll do next time. Allow his masculine energy to be fueled by your yin. Don't smother it. Don't pour the yin cold water on the fire. Fuel it. And watch men. We want to do stuff for women. We love serving. We love protecting them. It gives us energy. So if that's being smothered in any way, men will just revert into themselves. They will stop responding. They will stop acting. They will stop wanting to give to you, because why would they? You put their fire out all the time. And so a good way for a man to reignite his fire is to step away and do the things that he knows ignite his fire. Now, I hate the terms like feminine when it's referred to a man, the feminine side of a man. No. Men have a yang side and a yin side. Women have a yin side and a yang side. So we need to get in touch with that yin side of ourselves that whispers in our own ears, that was fucking epic, dude. Nice work. I'm so proud of you. And watch your own yang go, you know what? I did do a freaking good job, didn't I? And actually learn to build ourselves up again. We shouldn't necessarily need to rely on other people. So I often think that men emasculate themselves. No one can ever emasculate you. Okay, that's part of building our frame. The physical and mental, emotional and spiritual resilience or perseverance or substance that we have to draw on to build ourselves up. That healthy, balanced aspect of our ego that we can draw from to be like, you know what? That was awesome. Or you know what? Next time I'm going to smash this. I'm going to go and practice and I'll do better. Like I know I've got this. Like being able to actually teach ourselves how to be that yin aspect of ourselves to fan our own flames. Because then it won't matter if the woman has a little whinge here or there. But in relation, going back to that, women could nurture men a little bit more. Actually nurture those flames a little better if they're finding their men are disengaged and not responding, as opposed to smothering us by mothering us.
This is such a good conversation. And I know a lot of women watch these shows as well. So I'm really interested in this distinction, just to really get into a bit deeper between mothering and nurturing. So let's go back to the example of the man's not taking the rubbish out, and we'd like him to take it out. So we're not going to nag him. We're not going to say he didn't do it. We're going to compliment him, or I guess give him a reward, a little dopamine hit when he does, make him feel good.
As long as it's not too contrived, that might be good.
Yeah. Oh no, naturally, I think we'd be so happy that he's done it. How do we, if he's not doing it all, how do we ask him to do it?
It can be a tricky one. Is he not doing it because he's busy doing something that he has a higher priority on?
Okay.
Or is he sitting down playing games or just having a couple of beers, sitting on the couch, not doing anything productive, which he still might have a higher priority on, right? Otherwise he wouldn't be doing it, right?
Right.
But I think sometimes this comes down a little bit to, is it really that important that the bin goes out right then and there? How much overemphasis has a woman put on that one thing? Why can't a man choose to do what he wants to do at that time? And if it is something that has a higher value for him and his life, hey, babe, when you finish doing what you're doing, can you just take the rubbish out for me and then just drop it? Don't re-mention it. If he doesn't, I don't know, like that comes down to you'd have to ask some deep questions why that man is not engaging in that aspect. Has he already fallen, has that relationship already fallen into the trap where, he doesn't have that desire to do that for that individual? Has that spark already dropped away? And if that's the case, it's not a problem with the rubbish. And if you make it a problem about the rubbish, it's going to make the problem worse. What else, is the woman doing in that relationship that's not engaging that man? So I'll give another example. This was a really incredible thing. So I met this young woman at a retreat, and we stayed in the same room. And we had a big DM one night about where she was in her life, and she was really broken because she'd lost, she'd lost a baby, and she just wanted to be a mother. And anyway, her partner wasn't engaged in the relationship. He was just drinking, playing games. He was, not giving her as much attention as she wanted. The sex had become methodical, and, there was no love to even create a child, no passion, no love to even create a child. But she was scorned from that. And as a consequence, she was working her business in a very yang way, really forcefully trying to push things forward, kind of depleting her energy because she had a very delicate constitution, very delicate energy, and probably fatiguing herself, which then wouldn't allow her body to conceive. And there was just this reciprocal cycle that I could begin to see underneath. So over the course of 12 months of kind of knowing her and just chatting to her every now and again, not even coming from the side of the relationship, but from the side of her health from a Chinese medical perspective, of being able to build the qi and blood she needed to conceive. Okay. I was talking about her operating her business differently, from a more feminine, from a more yin perspective, and not so direct and yang, because she needed to conserve her energy. And I said, why don't you just stay at home and write a book? Because she loves to write. So I'm like, why don't you just stay and write? Like, if that's what you love and you're really good at it, and let your man go off to work, because he really loved to work and earn the money, and he really enjoyed that, but he was just so disengaged from it. So she ended up going back home, looking after the house and getting into her feminine motherly roles. She wrote 2 books, which were hugely successful. Her partner stopped playing games, stopped drinking, got 3 promotions, started engaging her in the relationship and sexually more. And so instead of using this yang force, she actually slipped into her feminine, and naturally her man became more engaged, started doing things around the house, started treating her differently, cared about her more lovingly, and eventually they fell pregnant. And so it's not about the freaking rubbish. And whilst women are going, you didn't do the rubbish, you didn't, well, this is the problem, or that's the problem. Maybe there's another way they can completely go about operating that would actually naturally just re-engage their man. That yang is not wanting to come home back into the body. It's not wanting to do its yang job for that yin. Why would it? The yin's not being yin. And so I see this on social media a lot. Women just freaking whinging about men. It's horrible. I hate seeing it. It makes me feel fucked as a human being. It doesn't want to make me to engage women at all. And men are dropping out of relationships and that, the masculine nurturing role in droves, because the disillusionment, that disillusionment's real, and it's palpable on social media. The best way to disperse yang is to start, waving your arms around and berating it and smothering it and telling it what to do and controlling it. Yeah, I mean, women talk about being the flow all the time, and women are meant to flow. Men are meant to flow. Men are meant to be able to have that ability, like hot air, to just rise and flow and do what we need to do as well, because we're yang. We have that energy. And if that's being smothered and dampened and controlled, yang energy can't be controlled, because what happens when you try and control too much heat?
Yes.
It'll explode out. And so there is that element that of nurturing that yang and allowing men to really step into their roles through giving us that nurture that we need, and fueling our flames, fueling us to be better, to be stronger, to show up. But you can't do it through that direct confrontation. Yeah, it's got to be done through nurture.
Masculine energy, right?
Boom.
Masculine energy when the women do that. I love what you said about the analogy of containing the masculine heat, because I've always felt that when you break it all down, and I know you use yin and yang, I use masculine, feminine, but you know, the same energies. The masculine energy seeks freedom and the feminine energy seeks love. So we balance it within the individual, and we balance it within union of couples and in the community and in the world. But the way you said, when women maybe unintentionally but are trying to contain that masculine energy, are the men feeling it as a limitation on their freedom? Are we stifling their freedom when we are in those wounded aspects of the female?
Yeah. I think that can definitely be an aspect for sure.
Yeah. It's really worth looking into. I just know my healing journey, even, you know, the past 6 years since I started writing and getting into this awareness of masculine and feminine energies, it's really helped me enormously. And even if, you know, not every relationship on the polarity chart is in, you know, sort of 10%, 90%, you know, a lot of 60, 40, 70, 30, it's really worth understanding. And as you said, just these basic, simple awareness around masculine and feminine energies can just help so many relationships.
Yeah, I believe so. We've got ourselves into an interesting social situation, haven't we?
We have, which we won't get into. I know you don't like looking back on how it happened, but if anyone does the research, it is a very interesting story. Nicholas, we've got about 20 minutes left. What else needs to be brought into this conversation around that inner animal?
I really just think the way that men maybe deal with men. And that whole kind of toxicity of the lover syndrome a little bit. Do you mind if I talk around that a little bit? Because I've read a few posts recently from men saying, you know, what do we need for men to trust men, or men don't trust, you know, and I don't think men innately actually trust men. So you love this because I'm actually going to get into the society bit in a moment. So think about it, right? We're there, our TPs are there, and our families and our children, and you know, we're a tribe. And a couple of men come over the crest of a hill on their horses. They're riding towards our village. What's the first thing that happens?
Yeah, jump up and defend.
All the warriors stand up and walk out to meet these men coming along, because we innately distrust them. If we don't know them, are they here to steal our women, our food, burn our village down? Like, why are they here? And so I actually think men innately distrust strangers. I think it's actually a part of who we are. I don't know your intentions. And so now we live in a society where we're all in our own little cage. And so a lot of men are strangers. But yet we're told that we should just go out and all automatically be friends with all these men. And I don't think it's a reality for a lot of men, especially men who have a strong warrior archetype. So it's a really interesting thing about how do we get more men engaged into a process of self-development and stuff when there is this innate distrust or separation from other men. And so I think there's an element where, you know, and guys they'll fall into their little tribes, their little groups. So how do we, it's an interesting question. How do we get these groups of men really working on self-development and self-growth? I know it's slowly happening, but with a lot of boys that have been fatherless, or they've been bullied, or they've been bullies and then been bullied back by the system, so then they've dropped out. You know, we've got massive amounts of where testosterone is being depleted in our society, you know, like at a huge rate. That's a massive problem. I think there really needs to be something that can pull this back in. And I actually believe that turning back towards nature and how we can step away from this separation, how can we start to, I guess, metaphorically, pull down those fences of our current society that creates a separation. And we're seeing it more and more, you know. And it's an interesting thing with Taoism, because Taoism will say, well, once you create white, you've created black. Once you've created wrong, you've created right. There's this dualistic nature. So once, you know, there's this group of people over here that do this thing, there's the opposite to that group of people. And it just starts to create more and more separation. And so part of kind of this inner animal process is getting back to that we all have this animal, we all have this nature. And so harnessing that and being in nature and being nature is that common ground below everything else, because we could divide ourselves up between religions, we could divide ourselves up between genders, we could divide ourselves up between sexes, we could, sorry, I just said that, between color, we can separate ourselves in so many different ways. But coming back to that innate part that we are all actually a part of nature. And so I'm wondering as much of bringing back that masculine energy and actually fanning those flames is actually part of how we increase testosterone in men. Getting back that grr, helping men feel that masculine drive. You know, it's so interesting now on social media, you know, we see hundreds of groups for women in business. Women supporting women. There are men out there supporting men, but it's not done very well. And there's literal, I looked the other day, there's no men's groups for business in my local area anyway, where I was searching. And with the rise of you know, with that real feminist view out there, you know, well, the patriarchy, that'd be patriarchy, right? If there was a group of men who are interested in supporting men for business. Yeah, right? But where is that drive that's allowing men to form together, to form those strong bonds of tribe about creating something better, something benevolent, something beautiful? And it's because of that past of the negative ways that tyranny and genocide and war and stuff has shown up, that how do we start to create an element of that positive, of tribes of men creating business, of creating social platforms throughout society for men to band together to create larger purposes for humanity in that really positive way? And so this is why I wonder if not so many men are engaging in the process of that self-development, because it's a little bit like, well, what's the freaking point?
I love this. And I do see us moving forward into this energy, into this unity. And I mean, from my understanding, part of this yang energy is competitiveness. And as you drop into the lower consciousness, it's survival, of course. So when you bring those factors into men coming together, you know, survival of the fittest and competitiveness, I mean, I think if that's a natural part of the male, the masculine yang energy, that's always going to be present. Maybe it's not something we have to deny, other than not have fear of it, just know that when we come into the frequency of abundance, there's enough for all. And if our attention is to create a better world, we're going to have much more success doing that in unity, where everyone has access to abundance, rather than to do it independently. So is that just a matter of consciousness and awareness that, as you said, as men do come more into this space of self-development, they can move into without fear of not having enough for themselves?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that I find really interesting about this, again, it comes back to that difference between masculine and feminine roles, is I've read a little bit about this, and it's been brought up by other people, that one of the reasons a lot of men are opting out of the larger roles in the workplace and in business is because we can't express our competitiveness against women the way that we would express it against other men. And so men drop out. Why bother? Because with another man, we'd be like, fuck off. Like, fucking, rah, we'd go at him. Like, no, and there would be that to and fro. And then there'd be a victor and there'd be a loser. And the one who loses being challenged, and he can go and recreate himself. Because that's that masculine challenge. It's not actually bad for him. The guy who's won, yep, up goes his testosterone, up goes his masculinity, and he goes forward and then creates. But when now that there's so many women, men can't compete against a woman like that. If you turn around and tell a woman to fuck off in the workplace and fucking give her a shove, like, your career's over, right? Whereas you would do that to a man, or you could. And there's actually a place for that competitiveness to happen for men. So we actually do need men to be in business with other men, because it's actually what allows us to thrive. Otherwise, again, that stifling effect of, no, you better be a good boy and don't get too rambunctious, and you better just play by the rules and calm down and, be a good little boy and sit there with your hands in your lap. Yeah, men will just opt out, and they will just go and do menial stuff to just get by, because they don't have that challenge to really help them want to thrive. And so there does
prison.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of control from the upper layers around subduing what I believe is this healthy masculinity, this animalistic yang energy. Sorry.
Exactly. So if you look at some really successful male businessmen, you can see the animal, and they are competitive and they are cutthroat, but they've integrated it to a way where they're not impolite. They don't need to physically compete. Like that physical level of stuff doesn't need to necessarily happen. But that's a whole process of development. And that's not within our schools. And I know we spoke about education in our last thing. Like, that level of competitiveness with me was almost extinguished at school. I was always blamed and shamed for that natural competitive nature that I have. And the more I integrate this aspect of myself, the more I really enjoy that feeling of, I'm going to win. Like, I just want to win. And when I get knocked down, I want to win. It actually really makes me try more. It makes me grow. It makes me develop. It makes me thrive. So if we can't have that level of challenge in a way that allows men to pick each other up, men will just opt out.
And be unfulfilled, as we spoke about earlier. Is this why the majority of men are so into sports and even watching sport? I mean, is that where they get some of that animalistic energy to recognize within them? Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, and I guess that's why you see a lot of, sports, high-level sports people or really good sports people actually do quite well in business, because they have that competitiveness. But now we're just gonna drug that out of our kids at school with Ritalin and all sorts of different stuff, just to subdue that level. Like you walk down the beach and you see mothers of of boys telling them off for wrestling.
Yeah,
the boys are practicing that challenge. But now, a whole heap of single mums out there, don't do that, but be a good little boy. Like, and I've read it in books called the little female gold standard, a little girl gold standard, which is, good little girl sitting there with her hands in her lap being, yes, miss, at school, whereas the boys want to go and rough and tumble and stuff like that's not appropriate. But that's actually part of being a man. Like male bears push down trees when they wake up from their hibernation. They sit there and they push on freaking trees until the tree falls down. Male rams smack each other in the head with their horns to compete for breeding rights. When they do that, their testosterone levels raise. And so if men are not allowed to have that challenge in our lives and not allowed to express it, and it's stifled, that animal part of ourselves that makes us want to do more, that makes us want to do right, that makes us fulfill our purpose, ignites our passion, that gives us the ability to want to share our winnings with people, that's gone.
Yeah, this is great. And especially, this little message now to single mums. I mean, you may know I raised two boys, and my boys were, into footy and wrestling. And lucky here in Australia, most of us got a backyard, so they were always, bringing in the dirt and the grass, and even tackling me onto the bed. Mom, I want to have tackling practice, stand at the end of the bed. So I'm glad I did the right thing there. But these tips to single mum, is there anything else you want to say around that? Because it is super important. And sometimes I can understand, if boys are particularly rowdy inside, you don't want to upset, if you're maybe living in an apartment or something, the neighbors, or, it's people, again, the mothers or the parents are trying to do the right thing, but they might not intentionally understand the harm that they're doing to their boys.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure it's a really delicate subject because of all those elements. And, there's a lot of, being a single mother, like, it's hard, right? Like straight up, there's a lot going on there that I would understand in some context. But I think it would just be, first of all, as a single mother, understanding that boys are different, and that needs to be nurtured. Yeah. And like, if you treat your boy and give your boy the kind of energy and nurture for the kind of man that you wish was in your life. Yeah. And so that's not necessarily being nice and kind, is that's like, are you going to talk to him about how to win? And if there's something going on at school, sit down and strategize with him and work out how we could compete better. Yeah, and actually really nurture that aspect of how can you win? How can you compete in a better way? And if they are at home, and you live in a small unit, they've got to be quiet, take them out. Take them out, let them climb on logs, let them climb up trees, let them jump off stuff, let them hurt themselves, let them fight.
But yeah.
Like, if you've got two boys and they're wrestling, champion them. Like, when they hurt themselves, you took that too far. Okay. But don't necessarily tell them off. Next time, how could you win without necessarily having to really actually hurt your brother? Maybe. Yes. Or just let it be what it is, and it's hard because I think really healthy men would do that naturally with their boys. And if, one boy hurt the other boy, you'd be like, stop whinging, stop crying. It's done now. Give him a hug, try more next time. So I think there's an element, again, of just like we spoke about with women in a relationship, you've got to nurture that aspect of men that's different. So as a single mum, that might be quite confronting, but I think you've got to realize you've got to raise a man that you would want to see in the world. And women are, I'm pretty sure, judging by social media, pretty sick of weak, listless, passionless, purposeless men who don't get up and take control of their life and their destiny to push themselves forward to be the most complete expression of themselves that they can be. And so how can you nurture that in your sons? Because they're different to little girls. They're going to want to do different things. And so how can you nurture that within them? I think might be a nice way to look at it.
So good. And I do think it's worth touching on. I loved how you said, bring our boys up to be the men that we want to see in the world. Now, I think a woman has to be aware, really feel into that, because she might unintentionally, if she's been abused or lived with a controlling man that maybe raised his voice or was violent, she'll have to be aware of the difference between healthy masculinity and wounded masculinity, because unintentionally she might tell her boys. I know I had to work through an issue when my boys got angry. That triggered me, because to me, I'd lived in a relationship where anger meant danger.
Yeah.
So it is, I just want to bring that awareness into that some women, as I had to become aware of, were unintentionally maybe subduing their sons because they had past experience where raised voices or anger or extreme physicality was meant danger was coming.
Look, that's a really difficult question to even go into, because that requires the woman healing. So interestingly, talking about going back, I'll answer that from the perspective of the inner animal. And I do actually end up wanting to run female inner animal programs and actually bringing them together, the men and the women together. But from a male perspective, and this would relate to the women as well, there's a lot of men out there who have been bullied, beaten by their fathers or by other men. And by actually working through the somatic processes of gameplay, so there's an element in humans called mammalian play biology. And so mammals all learn through play. So you'll see puppies fight. You'll see, animals wrestle to learn. And that's how they learn certain skills. So there's actually a level of, within that in-animal program, where people are getting used to actually threat. And it's incrementally built up. So what happens to people when they're abused is that wall is just broken down. And any level of threat just brings all that trauma straight back up. I've experienced this myself. And actually learning to incrementally bring that back into our world in a safe way actually allows us again to build that boundaries. And so potentially it would take a lot of mindfulness and a lot of understanding and a lot of clarity and I guess awareness. But I do believe there'd be a way there where that could actually be quite healing for the mother if they learnt to work with their sons in a way that actually allowed for a somatic healing of that. How that would take place, probably way bigger conversation than we've got time for, or even that I even think I may even be able to engage in. But I think there would be an element of being able to work with their children to harness that, which would also heal them.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
it's something I had to work through, as I said, and it just bringing awareness. These conversations just bring awareness. And once you've got awareness, then you can work on healing it and recognizing it and, understanding, the dynamics that are going on. Wow. Well, we'll wrap up, Nicholas. Is there any last words around this subject? And then, please let people know where they can find you.
I think the biggest message is not, the more we're scared of our animal, the more we're scared of that aspect of ourselves, the dark masculine, as you called it before, or the shadow, or whatever people want to really call that. The more we're scared of that and turn our back on it, the more likely it is to come back and bite us. And so learning about it and integrating it on a somatic level, actually training it and harnessing it to cultivate its power actually will lead to more healthy expression of that energy. The more we subdue it, suppress it, don't look at it, or pretend it doesn't exist, the more likelihood it has of coming out when we least expect it and biting us. So cultivate that. Feel anger. Allow yourself to actually be angry. Allow yourself to feel deeply passionate that has elements of frustration and irritability, and learn to harness and focus that energy on the outcomes that you want, and do it in so it happens in a healthy way, so it expresses in a healthy way, as opposed to just feeling them and expecting something to happen, because it'll lose out the side. You need to really sharpen those swords, sharpen those tools, and hone it and use that ability to your advantage.
Yeah, there's a great quote out, and the whole of the show I've been trying to, but I couldn't really have the space in my head to think of it, but it goes something like, a safe man isn't a man who who doesn't have the potential to be dangerous. A safe man is someone who has the potential to be dangerous but knows how to control it. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along those
I'm pretty
lines.
sure it's the Jordan Peterson one. Like he talks a lot about that.
Yeah.
And in Dangerous too, it's not talking about physical, and I'll probably put this on as the last words too. One of the last words is that this isn't necessarily about physical violence.
Right.
Being dangerous is about being as smart as possible, being as capable as possible, being as sophisticated as possible, learning social skills, learning all these elements that make us dangerous in the ability to take control of our life and get the best possible outcomes. And so having a strong articulation of language, written and spoken, is a really dangerous tool. Yeah. And so when we're talking about this, whilst the animal is about the physical aspect, it can actually help focus our mind and give us other elements of this ability to focus our being and our animal to come out with the strongest possible outcomes that we could want for ourselves and our purpose.
Amazing. Wow, what a great conversation. It's like, rah. When you do the female one, let me know. Might be exactly what I need to like heal that last little aspect of I did feel some emotion in me as we were talking about that last bit, so that's something I still have to work a little bit on. Where can people find you, Nicholas?
The best place to find me, the place I'm most active is Facebook. So Nicholas Blewett, just look me up personally. I'll probably put in the links below. You can find me on Instagram by more of my qigong work, which is through qifit, qifit.com.au. That's the handle I use on there. But connect with me on Facebook's probably the best place. That's where I do most of my work. I'll be actually doing more of a national kind of inner animal thing. I've been asked by different guys to show up in different parts of the country to do this work. It's warmed my heart to see how it's being accepted. And I really like that it's towing that line between that yin and yang to actually integrate them. So it's not super hard, aggressive work, but it's not super light, super spiritual, esoteric. Really trying to get that element of what are humans at our core and in nature, and how do we rejoin that mind, body, and spirit to create a somatic experience that cultivates that animal and that dangerousness of men to stand up in whatever potentially challenging times may lie ahead of us as a human race. We need men to stand up and hone that ability to be dangerous. It's really super important. And again, that dangerous is intellectual, spiritually, physically, emotionally dangerous. So the Inner Animal program is about really trying to teach men how to harness that, to build their frame, to build their integrity, to build their connection to themselves as well as connection to nature, to really ignite their passion so they can pull in their purpose and live out their destiny.
Amazing. Sounds just, like, if we had communities of men like that, imagine, where we would be. And I do see it coming. It is, the only way forward. So good days ahead.
I agree. I totally agree.
Bring it into the present moment. Good things are happening now. So thank you so much, Nicholas. Love this conversation. I love it, all the, aspects we covered, and very happy and honored to have you here. So much gratitude. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Gemma. Really grateful that you invited me on. Thank you so much. It's a great chat.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you could like, share, subscribe, I'd be very appreciative too. Let's get our men into their inner animal, and yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.